try to narrate some of this. These are old outtakes off of VHS videotape.
Yes!
Watch our sagebrush get pulled out of the ground.
Focus.
25 and set. And action. Oh my God. There's a job for intelligent men. Well, show me one and I'll ask him. Now keep thinking. You know, if we're just half serious about money, we should stop being hired hands.
Stick is supposed to break after the monster grabs.
Come in. Oh, shit.
The dangers of running through the desert. These are shot without sound. Try it again. This time a cameraman. This is a lot harder than it Everybody needs makeup. In this one, Ron said, I want a lot of saliva in its mouth. So the effects guys said, all right, we'll crank it up.
More comments? Yeah, Nestor, we know.
Look, if you're really short, you're welcome to dinner anytime. And enjoy the company. Look, I'm sorry about the money, guys.
No problem. Well, hell. That's a good lighter.
He's being towed here, so Kevin's having fun with the fact that he's We have weather, everything from below freezing to 100-degree weather. This scene is rain because of the snow.
I just flat don't believe it. Hey, where'd it get me?
Here again, it's
Here with you.
well below freezing while they're shooting this. That's Ron saying cut over the radio.
Okay, the phone's out, the road's out. We're on our own.
No
You
shit.
two are just monkey herding. Oh, come on, Nancy, let's not get personal about this thing. We gotta do something.
These guys are just ad-libbing here.
Yeah, my balls been shriveled up ever since I saw that thing. Shriveled up since the 60s.
Poor Michael had a lot of trouble with the guns in this show. Here, Reba's saying the cat out grass comes off the wall. He doesn't do anything with that.
Hey, Carmen, continue it. We're done.
This is one of Finn's first movies. I got funny. He's doing such funny stuff all the time.
Watch out now!
Got? Good. Out.
Hold on. A little bit more to the side and less on something.
Me?
Yeah.
A little more to the side?
Well, just you did it nice. Yeah, something more to it. Yeah.
Okay.
And action. He's grabbed.
This is that dramatic shot of the people waving goodbye to the guys riding out on horseback. We were a little bit behind schedule, so we had to move this piece of the building. That's me doing second unit. We moved it all the way to Los Angeles outside of, I was hoping we'd be able to see Magic Mountain in the background. That's it.
Alright. So that was cool. So I usually try to kick it off with a couple of questions, then of course we'll open it up to you guys. Time, unfortunately, only permits a certain amount. Once again, please raise a hand if you want to ask a question. But of course, you seem to keep working with the same team quite a bit as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the movie came to be because my partner and I, Brent Maddock, we've written some other movies that have been really successful. But we came out of making movies ourselves. We had been making short films where we did everything ourselves. And we were kind of frustrated that writers, pretty much, once you write your script, they go off and make your movie. Like the Short Circuit, we didn't even know they had left town. We called the director with a new idea, and they said, well, he's not here, he's shooting your movie. So we would bug our agents and say, we want to do something where we have more control. So well, you really want to produce, you want to write and produce. So we developed this idea from one of our old ideas about underground dirt monsters that we had sitting in our file cabinet, and then had a heck of a time selling it. It was different enough that we pitched it all over town, meaning we would go and describe it to executives and they didn't get it. And then we wrote a 25-page treatment and they didn't get it. And then we wrote the screenplay, and only one guy that our agent sent it to, Jim Jacks at Universal. He was a real film buff. He really knew movies, and he got it. He said, wow, this is like an updated 50s monster movie. I love this. So he fought for it, kicked and screamed. And Universal did get behind it. And the people that were in control there, they supported it all the way. There was a second part to it. Oh, we're doing the same thing. Well, it wasn't a huge hit in the theaters. I think it sort of broke even. They were very disappointed. In fact, the head of Universal called me up and said, we blew the advertising on this thing. I'm really sorry. And because nobody knew how to sell it. It was this weird mix of comedy and horror. And the ad department, they tried. It was a hard thing to sell. And so it did okay. But then VHS video came along. And suddenly it's this huge hit in video. And they called us up a few years later and said, it was sort of a backhanded compliment, I thought. They said, we could sell an empty box called Tremors. So we have to have Tremors 2. So the video division said, we have to have Tremors 2. You must have it. You guys can either do it or not. When you sell a screenplay, you sell it outright. You don't have anything to say. You have no control over it for the rest of your life. The studio has complete control of the material. So they could make Tremors 2 without us. So we sat down and we said, well, gee, let's try to come up with Tremors 2 and let's try to get everybody back. We flew to New York and tried to talk Kevin into it. And Kevin didn't want to do it. He actually, we didn't know this at all at the time, but Kevin felt this was the low point of his career. He was really, and you would, I didn't know this till years later. He couldn't have been more professional. He couldn't have been more great to work with. And I think it's one of his best performances ever.
Yeah.
And I think you would agree. Granted, you're fans, but so he didn't want to do it. So that meant it couldn't be a feature. Universal said, if Kevin does it, it's a feature. If he doesn't do it, it's a direct-to-video. So he didn't want to do it. And so Fred was willing to come back. So we had to rewrite our script, take the Valentine character out, because Trevor's 2 was written with Val and Earl continuing their adventure. And then everybody else, though, the effects team, the monster guys, just everybody, was happy to come back and do it, even to work on a low budget. It was much more low budget direct-to-video thing. And the same with Tremors 3 and Tremors 4. The team kept coming back, which was great for us because they enjoyed working. And everybody took pride in it. They liked that we were trying to make the world fit and to add to the monsters, to not break the rules, and make the sequels, everything fit together, that kind of thing. So we were very lucky. We were really lucky that Michael Gross was willing to come down. I remember on Tremors 3, he said, "I'm sure we should keep doing this thing."
So going off of what you said, it sounded like you wanted to have more control over the movie. What was that like as a writer when they were actually in production? You mentioned you were on set, you were seeing dailies. How much creative input were you able to have at that point?
Oh, we were crazy with input. First of all, Ron was a longtime friend of ours. Ron had hired us to make our first movies way back when we were making short movies by ourselves.
This is the director?
Ron, the director, Ron Underwood. And Ron had stayed in the short movie world. He was making movies back in the day that were shown in schools when they would roll the projector out in the classroom. Anybody remember that? But that was a fairly big market. There was a lot of schools and libraries to sell to. So Ron had stayed in that. We had sold Short Circuit. We were kind of Hollywood guys. So when this opportunity came up, we got the interest in it. We said, we want to attach Ron to it. And I'm rambling again. That's the question.
How involved were you during production?
Oh, that was my point. Yeah. So then we drove Ron completely crazy. We were all over it all the time.
Yeah.
In the famous scene in the basement when Michael says the line, and we kind of knew this line was going to be an important line. We broke into the wrong goddamn restroom. We were all very uptight about it. Michael was uptight about it. Ron was. We were. Oh God, we gotta get it right. We gotta get it right. So we do the scene. Michael would say the line, and then me and Brent would run over to Ron in a confab. So finally, Michael came and said, "Let's have this conversation all together, shall we?" Because it was bugging him. So we backed off a little bit. But yeah, we had a tremendous amount of input, and that's where I got the directing bug. I directed second unit on the show because it got big enough, and Universal was kind enough to give us a budget for a second unit. So a lot of the bits and pieces that are very hard to get when the main unit is shooting, like close-ups of tentacles and that kind of stuff, I ended up shooting with the second unit, which got to be huge. It was like 100 people or something. It was crazy. Or we thought it was crazy. It's typical for a real movie, but we were. So anyway, yeah. Yes, we have a tremendous amount of input, and it's still, for an overall experience in Hollywood, with all the experiences I've had, it's the best in terms of creative input. And it was a big learning curve for me and Brent, who are the primary writing guys on this stuff, because you have to have a staff, you have to have people cranking out scripts. So you have 4 or 5 people that we hired who came in to write scripts, sometimes based on our stories, but mostly based on their own stories. And Tremors, we didn't even know this. It's a hard thing to do, this weird mix of comedy and horror. It's hard to get it right, at least in our egomaniacal view of things. So the first scripts that they wrote, we had to drastically rewrite, and we were exhausted, and they were upset. But fortunately, Michael came back to me again, and he was executive producing, and he was kind of our anchor on the set. The show was shot in Mexico, which made things vastly more difficult. And the studio felt that we would save money. I can't believe that we saved money, given what we wasted in bribes and everything else. I think I'm kidding. But it's the TV that every feature guy does this when they go into TV. It's a nightmare, it's a machine that eats material as fast as you can write it. So in that sense, it was hard, but it was fun. Like I say, Michael was our anchor in Mexico. He understood the show, and he could kind of oversee things down there and kind of get the directors going in the right direction, because the directors didn't know Tremors either. They were coming in, they just directed, CSI. And the first guy thought, oh, when the graboids come, the camera should do this. Oh, the shell should do this. It was fun. I wish we'd gotten a second season, because we had a whole bunch of ideas for the second season. We didn't quite get there.
Charity?
Anyway.
Yeah, anybody else? Anybody else?
Any questions?
Gentleman in the back?
What, if you can remember, what are some of the most ridiculous studio notes that you've gotten from execs on screenwriting?
On Tremors? Or on screenwriting?
Or on any script?
Oh, well,
I know
on any script,
some pretty
it gets pretty extreme. I gotta say, again, the studio was, other than the studio desperately wanting to know where the graboids came from, they really did not like the scene where we throw out all the ideas, because there's only 4 fantasy things that can come from. So they said, we want to know. We wrote the scene, and then we gave the script out, and the team came together for a big production meeting. We wrote They Were From Outer Space. We wrote Bert, when he was out with Heather in those scenes, he found a spaceship and eggs.
Oh.
And we never shot that scene, but we wrote it. And the whole team said, what? This is terrible. So I went back and I said, okay, the 150 production people said, this is an awful idea. And the studio guy said, okay, take it out. I'll try to give you, I don't want to go to my whole career here. Here's the strangest note. This was on the Wild Wild West. Not much of our script was left in the Wild Wild West. But those of you who've seen it, there's a big mechanical steampunk spider. Huge, and I love that thing. That was our idea. For a long time, that was a stealth bomber. And because the guy, the main producer on that movie, insisted that it should be a stealth bomber. And we said, okay, you understand that it's 1880. He said, I don't care, the stupid spider is not scary, a stealth bomber is scary. Can't it have rivets or anything like that? Could it be made of iron? Maybe. Absolutely true. And so Colonel drafted, until Barry Sonnenfeld got the script, it wasn't really we tweaked it to where it was a kind of a steampunk flying machine. And Barry Sonnenfeld came in at one point at a big meeting just as the movie was getting ready to go. A huge meeting with 1 billion people in it, because it was a big movie, so everybody was in the meeting. People you don't even know, people that don't even work at the studio. And Barry said, I kind of don't like, he had this high voice, and I kind of don't like the flying machine, because it means I'm going to be in the air a lot, and I'm not going to know where I am, and it's a lot of blue screen, and a lot of just seeing sky. Now, I'm in the back of this gigantic room full of executives. I said, Mr. Sonnenfeld, there is a version of the script with a giant walking spider. Oh, I'd like to see that. I kid you, this is all true. And a studio executive stood up and said, I really support that idea, Mr. Sonnenfeld. Now, the spider was back. Yeah, Wild Wild West was probably our craziest experience. I'll come back to that sometime. Except I won't be able to tell you anything about the movie because they fired us.
All right, anybody else? Anybody else? Go ahead.
I've been following Michael Gross on Facebook, and there's going to be a new Tremors movie from what I've heard. Are you involved in this?
Sadly, no.
No?
Sadly, no.
I was going to say, is there anything fun you can tell us about it, but no? Oh!
I know almost nothing about it.
That's actually kind of disappointing then.
Well, I can tell you briefly what happened. It was 10 years, I guess, since Tremors 4. We had written Tremors 5 10 years ago because they were going to make Tremors 4 and Tremors 5 back to back. The bottom fell out of the DVD market, and to this day, no one quite knows why. If you know why, you should tell Hollywood because they're really baffled by it. But people just stopped buying DVDs. And so they put Tremors 5 on the shelf and they forgot about it. And for years, I was telling fans, no, there's no chance, there's never going to be a Tremors 5. And then one day they called us and said, we would like you to rewrite your script for Tremors 5, but we remind you that your contractual attachment to Tremors has expired. So we don't want you to do anything else on it because we don't think you have the skill to do a low-budget movie. And we said, well, maybe you should rewrite it yourself. No, we were stunned. We still, that's all we know. You have these negotiations between your agent and their executives, and you get everything third hand. So that's all I know anyway. You know, the people that were doing negotiating may know more. But yeah, so it just went off and got made. It's already been shot. Michael decided to do Bert, which why not? Why would he not?
Yeah.
And yeah, shot in South Africa. I know that.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Pardon me?
I would say that's what I've heard. Is that
Yeah.
he's been posting pictures from Africa.
Yeah,
So.
and it's done, and it's in Canada, and it comes out for some reason much later in the year. It's on its way.
Well, that's kind of a shame.
With Jamie
though, that-
Kennedy, the co-star.
Well, it's a shame that yours weren't involved.
I know.
Yeah, it really is. Oh, jeez. Almost makes me not want to watch it, but got to.
Well, it might be good.
It might.
Yeah.
Just real quick, what's next for you then?
I am, my partner and I, because we write original ideas, we're having a heck of a time, to be honest. In Hollywood right now, it's you know, mainstream Hollywood, which is kind of where we were. We kind of leapfrog right out of short films into, you know, short circuit, is all about remakes and sequels now. I'll give you a quick example. One of our pitches that we did in the last few years, we could still get in to see studio executives, you know, and we pitched in this idea. I said, God, I love this. Thank God. I said, can't touch it. It's not based on anything. Said, yeah, it's an original idea. And he said, no, if it was a comic book or something, that'd be great. No, can't touch it. So I've written it as a book, which will be for sale. If the book sells well enough, I actually did turn the story into a novel, just out of sheer frustration.
What's it called?
I like the idea. My partner and I did. Yes, who else? Anyway. Yes, back there in the red shirt.
Oh, yeah, yay! My Orida poster earlier. I think that Wall-E is an abomination, and I think it's a blatant rip-off of number 5, given that instead of pursuit of knowledge, he's going for pursuit of a pretty robot. How do you feel about Wall-E compared to number 5?
The only odd thing to me about it was that I read an interview. I've never talked to the people who made that movie, but I read an interview with them where someone asked them that question: did number 5 influence you in any way? And they said, absolutely not.
Goddamn liar.
That's the only thing I found odd. I mean, if they had just said, sure, we like number 5, that would have been. Yes.
Tremors is one of my 2 or 3 favorite horror comedies. I'm actually in the process of trying to write a horror comedy at the same time, but I'm having trouble mixing horror and comedy. I have scenes that are horrific, I have scenes that are funny, but nothing where I mix the two. Did you have that kind of trouble mixing horror and comedy? And if so, what did you do to work through it?
In our case, the drafts previous to the draft we shot were too funny. And the rule that we applied to pull the humor back out of it was never make fun of the monsters, never have anybody say a funny line just because it's a funny line. It has to come out of the moment like Michael's line, like many of the lines do. Try to make sure that, it's an old saw, but it's true. You just try to make sure that people are doing as much as possible what they would do in an extraordinary situation. That's what we did on Tremors. And that was the problem we had with the series. Everybody came in writing funny. We had all these sitcom writers writing, you know, Jodie Chang is drunk one morning, and we're like, no. Jodie's a workaholic, she's never drunk. So, that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's what, you know, the comedy has to come out of the situation. Okay. So that's what I try to do. Yes, over there.
Yeah, I love your movie, and it's really an honor to be watching it with you. One thing, it's a movie that I watch over and over again. One thing I always like to do is I think about, like, if you removed a protagonist from a movie, would the results be different? Would the output be different? Like, if there was no Ripley in Aliens, what would have happened? If there was no John McClane, if he stayed home, what would have happened? Do you think if Val and Earl had made it to town, would everybody in Perfection have just died? Or would they have been able to kind of pull it together and still survive?
Well, Bert would
have Bert.
Get a run for their money, but I think they would have been in trouble. They were 2 handymen, and Val and Earl came out of the our feeling of we knew we were doing a 50s monster movie. I mean, I did. I'm the geeky guy. I'm the geeky guy of our company because I'm the one who was begging them to get this the outtakes that you saw. Nobody was interested in that. It's 25 years ago, before DVDs with extras and all that stuff. Now they shoot all this stuff. I'm clinging to old VHS cassettes and dragging them around, copying them, and nobody cares. But we knew that we didn't want all the standard characters that are in the old sci-fi movies, and I do think that the talent probably wouldn't make it without talent. Most of them wouldn't. Heather and Bert, well, even Heather and Bert, because they didn't understand that if they stayed in their house, it was going to get torn down. Val and Earl, those Midwestern can-do people who just figure out how to do stuff. Yes?
I love your personalities in your show. I'm just wondering, how do you come up with all the little subplots, like the rock, paper, scissors, and the plan, and there's all these things that just make these characters. Are they from your personal life, or, I mean, where do you get these?
A great deal of that comes from my partner, Brent. Although I think I wrote the Rec Room line. I'm always amazed. Brent is just a very quirky guy, and he's the guy with, Val just doesn't grab the radio, they hang him by his feet, and he gets the radio. And he did write a lot of those quirky lines. Here's some Swiss cheese and bullets. Somebody over here, I saw, yes?
Yeah, I've always been curious. How did the idea of the tongue and the graboids come about? Because it could have been like a generic, typical worm, but I think the tongues make it such a more unique creature.
That was purely because we were on such a low budget. This is true. We sold this idea to Ron and the studios. Hey, they're underground. You never see them. There's no special effect. There's no CG in this movie because it didn't exist. And then Ron said, yeah, but I can't never see them. And we started thinking, we're talking to the effects guys, Tom and Alec of ADI, and we were saying, what if they had something small that could come up? Brent kept saying, a hand puppet. They eventually made a tentacle hand puppet. We had really complicated ones that were beautiful mechanical things that you operated with levers, but they eventually made a hand puppet, which we used quite a bit. And it came out of that. We said, we've got to be able to see them without dealing with this 8-foot tall, 80-pound, 100-pound thing with a guy inside of it. For those scenes where it bursts out of the ground, and it only happens like 3 times in the movie, it was like a day of setup. And he buried the guy alive for several hours. He had a video camera and a headset. And we would set lowering down on the elevator and then cover the hole with dirt, and then the crew would get ready and the actors would get ready. Tom was doing anything up there, It's a billion degrees. We actually had a guy look for rattlesnakes before we lowered him down. Crazy. Yeah, but the tentacles were a low budget solution to the monster. There was somebody there, yes.
Oh, yes. I've seen this movie numerous times in the old days of VHS with my daughters. And there's one question that they asked, they said, you have to ask them. And it's a question that's been bugging them for years. Okay, why couldn't they all fit on the bulldozer?
I thought that tonight. I don't know.
They could.
It's not as exciting.
It would have been a little bit of a stretch, I think, but yeah, it had a roof and everything. Yeah, that was bugging me.
When you're escaping.
There's somebody way back there.
Way back here. I was curious about your influences, but also I was wondering if you've considered crowdsourcing, because tons of artists, it's worked really well for them.
I'm sorry, didn't quite hear you.
Your influences, whether as a writer or director or whatever, but also in terms of funding your projects, have you considered crowdsourcing? Because it's worked. Really, I mean, for a lot of artists.
Yes, fans have talked to us about crowdsourcing for years. I answer all the questions on the Stampede website. Stampede is our company. And we actually, just before Universal told us that they didn't want us to do Tremors 5, we had asked them about crowdsourcing, if we came up with half of Universal picking the other half. So we haven't pursued it beyond that, and right now we're in a different universe. We're trying to, my partner and I are working on a TV pilot, and because that's where all the original ideas are being done, and we don't have a big foothold there other than the series. As far as influences go, 50s monster movies. I grew up watching all that stuff, Ray Harryhausen, and reading a lot of science fiction, and action. I'm not really an ordinary people kind of guy. Mostly action and monsters. Saw somebody else there, yes.
When writing it, did you have a favorite character?
Did I what?
Have a favorite character?
I don't think so. We really liked all of our characters. We thought a long time about who would be in this little town. Brent and I had both we lived in Southern California, and we did a lot of camping out in deserts and going to weird little towns and meeting these people. And we were I can't say we have a favorite really. We like them all. I mean, Bert is fun to write for because he's so over the top. You know? Yeah. But that's fun to do. Bert is easy. It's harder to write the people who are more realistic. Yes. So.
To what extent did you write the action scenes, like the no dialogue, action only scenes, in this specific script?
In Tremors, everything was worked out. And then
before it ever hit production.
Oh yeah, and then storyboarded after that, worked out with the directors, worked out with the effects and stunt people. We were big believers, and we had to be. I mean, yes, we had a lot more money than we had on the other movie, on the later movies, but it was still a low-budget movie. And you couldn't get out there and just be making it up as you went.
Right.
We worked it out in great detail. It's pretty much exactly what we wrote. There's some funny inventions in there. The one that always strikes me funny, because I thought it was an accident, was when Kevin jumps off the roof. It's actually the stunt guy who takes the fall, but he hits the piece of roof that's already loose and it breaks. And I called Ron, I saw the daily, I said, Ron, oh my God, is the stunt guy okay? He said, no, we planned the whole thing. So, yes?
Yeah, the character of Valentine. Now, was there other actors other than Kevin Bacon that you were considering? Or they were considering, were there other,
Oh yeah,
several in line?
boy, this is where Ron would be great, because Ron remembers this stuff much better than I do. There were many people considered. Bill Paxton was considered. The studio sent us after Kevin. The studio was worried about this movie. They told us, you have to read Reba McEntire, even though she's never done a movie before. Yeah. You have to read Michael Gross, even though he's family ties. And we were so lucky. I mean, Reba came in and she blew us away. And Michael came in and literally jumped up on Ron's desk doing a graboid thing.
Ooh.
And freaked Ron out. Michael was just, hey, we couldn't believe it was the Family Ties guy. So we were lucky because the studio was doing what they do. They were trying to shore up the movie, give it every element it could. And the linchpin was Kevin Bacon. Even though Bill Paxton was considered, but he wasn't as big a star. Believe it or not, one of the agencies really pushed Michael Caine for the Fred Ward. Honestly, thank you. So good. I wish Ron was here because a lot of people were talked about it. But when the studio realized that Kevin was available, they sent Ron off to. It was heart in the throat moment for us. They sent Ron to lunch with Kevin Bacon and said, come back with him or you don't got a movie. Anyway. Yes.
I really enjoy your Short Circuit movie, the first and the second. So I'd like to know, what was your influence for creating such a plot?
For which one?
Short Circuit.
Oh, Short Circuit. Well, I happen to know that. I had been doing short films for schools and libraries, and I was an animator. I thought I was going to be an animator before I discovered writing and directing. And we had done a short film that featured a puppet animation robot, a model that you would animate with stop motion animation. And it was a huge success. It sold extremely well, and the robot character was very popular. So that's why my partner and I said, Ron said, you guys, you should write a script with a robot in it. And then we said, okay, what's different? What can we do that's different? And what struck us was that every robot in every major movie is already considered to be alive. They just play that joke right from the start. R2-D2, he gets angry. C-3PO is afraid all the time. And all the robots prior to that. That's always been the joke. And we thought, well, really, nobody would buy that at all. Nobody would think that at all. So that's how we came up with the basic idea of he is alive and nobody believes it. But that, yeah, it came out of this short film that we did. That was, I mean, hugely successful. It sold to 15,000 schools. Big money in those days.
And you were saying you were a geek, right? Did that have an impact on that movie?
The one that we wrote, the short film?
Yes, you said you're kind of nerdy and you're...
Well, I just, I'm a film buff guy, and I love, when I was a kid, it was Famous Monsters of Filmland, 3 pictures from some weird movie that nobody's ever heard of. But yeah, those are all my influences, really. There, yes.
Are vacuums good for parties?
Say it?
Are vacuums good for parties?
Vacuums.
It's one of the lines in the beginning.
Oh!
He lugs around the vacuum.
Probably a rent line. I didn't even
Got time for maybe 1 or 2 more. If anybody's got some question they're dying to ask, looking pretty good. Oh, last one. It's you.
You mentioned you like sci-fi novels. Who's your favorite author?
Well, I go back a ways. I confess, I got busy enough in Hollywood that I haven't read a lot of current stuff, but I was,
I like Arthur C. Clarke.
Heinlein, Theodore Sturgeon, A.E. Van Vogt, those guys, that era. That's the stuff I read.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Cool.
Bradford.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How can folks keep track of what's next? How can they keep up with you?
Well, I do have a Facebook page, S.S. Wilson. That's easy to find. I try to remember to put stuff on there. And, and a lot of it is, I'm just writing, so I don't want to put on Facebook. I wrote another draft of the TV pilot today. But stuff like this is on there. So.
Cool. Well, we can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you.
And thanks for hanging out with us. And maybe we'll bring back some more of your films.
Yeah, I can come in, like I said, I can do Wild Wild West.
We would love to.
Yeah. Harry's not included.